Don't you dare. You're not going to deny me this opportunity, I said, my voice rising as I stood in Richard Wilson's office doorway. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I forced myself to stand tall. The department head looked up from his desk with a satisfied grin that made my stomach turn. After a decade of dedicated service to Peterson Consulting, this was how it would end, with that smug smile I'd seen too many times before. My name is Elaine Bennett, and at 52, I've spent the last 10 years of my career at one of San Francisco's leading corporate consulting firms. Through 3 company restructures, 2 economic downturns, and countless late nights perfecting client presentations, I had proven myself invaluable, or so I thought. The photo of my late husband Robert on my desk had witnessed it all, his encouraging smile reminding me daily of our shared dream for my career success. Elaine, please sit down, Richard motioned to the chair across from his desk, his voice carrying that rehearsed sympathy that HR must teach in management training. We're bringing in someone younger for your role. After 10 years, it's time to move on. The words hung in the air between us, someone younger, not someone more qualified or experienced, just younger. I felt the familiar heat of indignation rising in my chest as I thought of Robert's words when I'd faced challenges before, never let them see you break, Ellie. I took a deep breath instead of letting my emotions show. This wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. I nodded calmly, though inside I was screaming. I appreciate the notice, Richard. My muted response clearly wasn't what he expected. Richard blinked momentarily, thrown off script. He ran his hand through his carefully styled hair, a gesture I'd seen whenever he felt uncertain. Well, good. I'm glad you understand. The transition will take place over the next month. We'll need you to train your replacement, Olivia. She graduates from Berkeley next week. I smiled thinly, thinking about our mortgage that was finally paid off last year after Robert's medical bills had nearly bankrupted me. Of course. What Richard didn't know, what nobody in the department knew, was that the next board meeting would be special, very special indeed. Will there be a formal announcement? I asked, my voice steady. We'll announce it at the department meeting on Monday, Richard replied, already turning his attention back to his computer screen, dismissing me. HR will be in touch about your severance package. I stood up and smoothed my blazer, thinking about my 2 children who had finally finished college after years of juggling tuition payments and work responsibilities. I see. And the quarterly board meeting is still next Thursday at 2 p.m.? Richard looked up, confusion flickering across his face. Yes, but that's not something you need to concern yourself with anymore. Just double-checking my calendar, I said lightly. Will CEO Davis be in attendance? Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. Why do you ask? Just curious, I replied with a shrug. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. As I walked out of his office, I felt strangely calm. 10 years at Peterson Consulting had taught me patience, resilience, and the importance of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. The next board meeting would reveal everything, and Richard Wilson's smug satisfaction would evaporate faster than morning fog on the bay. Some secrets were worth keeping, even when you were being shown the door. Walking back to desk, as I walked back to my desk, I couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. 10 years of dedication reduced to a casual dismissal in a 15-minute meeting, yet here I was, holding on to information that would completely flip the script. My fingers brushed against the small jade plant on my desk, a gift from Robert on my first day at Peterson. For growth and perseverance, he had said. How right he had been. Everything okay? Asked Marcus Chen from the adjacent cubicle. His eyes held genuine concern. He'd seen too many people walk that same path from Richard's office, faces drawn with shock and disappointment. Marcus had been at Peterson even longer than I had, 15 years of loyal service, with a photo of his 3 children prominently displayed on his desk. Never better, I replied, voice low enough to avoid attracting attention. My hand automatically went to the wedding band I still wore on a chain around my neck. Just the usual Friday drama. I hadn't told anyone about the private meeting with CEO Catherine Davis 3 weeks ago. It had been unexpected, a call directly to my personal cell on a Sunday afternoon while I was tending to my rooftop garden, the hobby that had helped me maintain my sanity after Robert's passing. "Elaine, we need to talk about your future at Peterson," Catherine had said, her normally formal tone relaxed and direct. "Not at the office. Can you meet me at Bayview Cafe tomorrow at 7 a.m.? The memory of that morning was still vivid. Catherine had arrived early, securing a private corner table with a stunning view of the Golden Gate Bridge shrouded in morning mist. I remember thinking how the fog mirrored the uncertainty in my own life, sometimes obscuring the path ahead, but always eventually lifting. "I'll get straight to the point," she'd said after we exchanged pleasantries. "The board is restructuring our leadership approach. We've been watching your work on the West Lake project. Your innovative solutions saved us millions and impressed our biggest clients." I'd been preparing for bad news, not praise. My hands had tightened around my coffee mug as I thought of Robert's favorite saying, "Expect nothing, appreciate everything." "Thank you," I'd managed to say, feeling oddly vulnerable. "But we want you on the executive board, Elaine," Catherine had continued, as our new chief operations officer. "You understand both the technical and human elements of our business in a way nobody else does. You've demonstrated not just professional excellence, but true emotional intelligence in managing teams across generational divides." The offer had been unexpected and overwhelming, a seat on the board overseeing all operational aspects of Peterson Consulting, including Richard's department. "Why me?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of the opportunity. "Because you see what others miss," Catherine had replied simply, "and because it's time we had someone at the table who remembers what it's like to be in the trenches. Someone who understands that our people are more than just resources, they're individuals with lives, families, and unique contributions." The secrecy had been Catherine's idea. "The board vote is just a formality, but I need to manage the politics carefully. Some members, particularly those with connections to Richard, might try to interfere if they knew beforehand." So, I'd signed the contract with only Catherine and the company's legal counsel present. For 3 weeks, I'd attended early morning strategy sessions disguised as vendor meetings in my calendar. I'd reviewed confidential reports and helped draft a new operational framework after hours, all while Richard plotted my removal. Back at my desk, I checked my phone. A message from Catherine, "Contracts filed, announcement prepared, still on for Thursday." I texted back a single thumbs-up emoji, feeling a flutter of anticipation in my chest. For the rest of the afternoon, I diligently worked on transition notes for my supposed replacement. Richard passed by twice, looking pleased with himself each time. Let him enjoy this moment of perceived victory, I thought, remembering how Robert always said patience was the most underrated virtue. The real revelation was just days away. The weekend dragged on endlessly as I prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most consequential week of my career. I spent Saturday morning in my rooftop garden, the familiar routine of pruning and watering bringing a sense of calm to my racing thoughts. The plants had been Robert's idea when we first moved into the apartment, a little piece of nature in the concrete jungle, he'd called it. Now, 3 years after his passing, it had become my sanctuary. "What would you think about all this, Rob?" I asked aloud, touching the small memorial stone nestled among the plants. The morning sunlight caught on my wedding ring, still hanging from a chain around my neck. No answer came except the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves, but I could almost hear his laugh, see his proud smile. I spent Sunday organizing my closet, carefully selecting outfits for the upcoming week. For Monday's department meeting, I chose a professional but understated ensemble, nothing that would signal the impending change in my status. For Thursday's board meeting, however, I selected my power outfit, a tailored charcoal suit I'd purchased after Catherine's offer, accented with a subtle jade silk blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. Robert had always said green was my color, that it made me look both strong and compassionate. That evening, I video called my daughter Melissa in Chicago, careful not to reveal anything about the upcoming changes. "Mom, you seem distracted," she said, her eyes, so like her father's, narrowing with concern. "Is work okay?" I forced a smile. "Just busy." "How's medical school treating you?" "Brutal as expected," she laughed. "Dad would be so proud of both of us right now, you know. Me following his footsteps into medicine, and you still climbing that corporate ladder he always knew you could conquer." "I think of him every day at work," I admitted, my voice softening. "Sometimes I still expect to get his text messages during my lunch break." "Me too, Mom." "Me too." After we hung up, I sent a quick text to my son James in Boston, getting a characteristic brief but loving response. My children were my greatest accomplishment, the one thing Richard Wilson with his 2 failed marriages would never understand. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, dressed in the professional attire I'd worn for years. The department meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. I took my usual seat near the middle of the table, not too prominent, not too hidden. As colleagues filtered in, the room buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy, conversations about weekend activities, project deadlines, and industry gossip. My hand unconsciously went to my necklace, finding comfort in the familiar shape of the ring. It was a habit I'd developed after Robert's death, a small gesture that helped me feel his presence during difficult moments. Richard entered last, followed by a young woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't have been older than 23, with a nervous smile and wide eyes that took in the room with undisguised excitement. I noticed a small locket around her neck, perhaps a gift from someone special, much like my ring. "Good morning, everyone," Richard announced, clapping his hands together. "Before we dive into project updates, I have an important announcement." The room quieted immediately. Several of my colleagues glanced in my direction, sensing what was coming. "I'd like to introduce Olivia Parker, who will be joining our team as Senior Project Manager. Over the next month, she'll be working closely with Elaine, who will be leaving us to pursue other opportunities." There it was, the corporate euphemism for being pushed out. I kept my expression neutral as curious and sympathetic looks turned my way. Marcus caught my eye from across the table, his brow furrowed with concern and something else, anger on my behalf, perhaps. "Elaine has been with us for 10 years, Richard continued, his tone suggesting he was bestowing a great honor upon me by acknowledging my service, and we appreciate her contributions. Please make Olivia feel welcome as she transitions into this important role." Olivia gave a small wave. "I'm really excited to join the team. I've heard so many great things about Peterson Consulting." As the meeting progressed through project updates and quarterly targets, I noticed Richard watching me carefully, perhaps expecting an outburst or sign of distress. Instead, I participated normally, offering insights on my current projects and volunteering to help with a challenging client issue. I even managed to smile genuinely when highlighting the success of our last campaign, a project that had kept me working late for weeks, often missing dinner with friends who had tried to pull me out of my grief after Robert died. After the meeting, Olivia approached me tentatively. "Ms. Bennett, Richard said you'd be showing me the ropes this week." Of course, I replied, gesturing for her to follow me to my workspace, and please, call me Elaine. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes that she'd tried to conceal with makeup. As we walked, I felt a pang of sympathy for Olivia. She was merely a pawn in Richard's game, unaware of the complicated dynamic she'd stepped into. First thing you should know, I said once we reached my desk, is that consulting at Peterson is as much about politics as it is about technical skill. Olivia looked surprised by my frankness. I thought it would be more merit-based. I smiled. It should be. Maybe someday it will be again. I paused, noticing how she quickly checked her phone. Everything okay? Olivia hesitated before answering. My son's daycare. They sometimes call with issues. You have a child? I asked, genuine interest replacing professional courtesy. A 2-year-old, she admitted, looking slightly defensive as if expecting judgment. I finished my degree while raising him alone. I thought of my own struggles as a working mother, though I'd had Robert's support. That's incredibly impressive, Olivia. If you ever need flexibility for your son, come to me first before going to Richard. I know some workarounds in the system. Her eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. Thank you. That's really kind. We women have to stick together in this business, I said simply, feeling a new resolve about the changes I would make as COO. The next 3 days passed in a blur of knowledge transfer sessions, project handoffs, and careful documentation of my workflow. Through it all, I maintained my professional demeanor, giving Olivia every advantage I could without revealing my true circumstances. I found myself genuinely liking the young woman. Her determination to succeed as a single mother reminded me of my own struggles when Robert had been battling his illness and I'd had to balance hospital visits with work deadlines. How do you handle everything? I asked her during lunch on Wednesday, genuinely curious about her juggling act. One day at a time, she replied with a tired smile. My mother helps when she can, but she works 2 jobs herself. Some days I feel like I'm failing at everything, being a mom, being professional. She trailed off, embarrassment crossing her face. Sorry, that's probably too personal. Not at all, I said, thinking of those early years with Melissa and James. I raised 2 kids while working full-time. My husband was a great partner, but there were still days when everything felt impossible. I hesitated, then added, he passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. Olivia's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm so sorry. Life throws curveballs at all of us, I said. The trick is learning to swing anyway. On Wednesday afternoon, Catherine called a company-wide meeting for Friday morning, the day after the board meeting. The email mentioned exciting organizational changes and new leadership announcements. My heart skipped a beat when I read it, the reality of what was coming finally hitting home. Richard read the message with a frown, clearly not privy to whatever Catherine had planned. He stopped by my desk later, his casual demeanor barely masking his curiosity. Do you know what this is about? He asked, nodding toward his computer screen. No idea, I lied smoothly, adjusting the jade plant on my desk. Perhaps they finally found someone to fill that VP position that's been vacant. He nodded, satisfied with my ignorance, and walked away. That evening, I called both my children to share the news that I couldn't yet tell anyone at work. They were ecstatic, Melissa even threatening to fly home for the weekend to celebrate. Dad would be over the moon, James said, his voice thick with emotion despite being normally reserved. Remember how he always said you were the smartest person in that company? He was biased, I laughed, though tears pricked at my eyes. He was right, James insisted. Mom, I'm so proud of you. Those words carried me through my final preparations for Thursday, the day everything would change. Thursday morning arrived with a strange sense of calm washing over me. I'd prepared for this day meticulously, choosing my outfit with particular care. The tailored charcoal suit I'd purchased for the occasion, accented with the jade silk blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. As I fastened my husband's wedding ring on its chain around my neck, I whispered, "Today's for us, Rob." I arrived at work to find my going-away party in full swing, a sad spread of supermarket cupcakes and lukewarm coffee in the break room. My colleagues had signed a card with generic well wishes and memories of projects we'd tackled together. I accepted their condolences with grace, playing my part in this corporate theater while my stomach fluttered with anticipation. "We'll miss you around here," said Marcus, giving me an awkward side hug. His eyes held a knowing glint, as if he'd somehow sensed there was more to my calm acceptance than met the eye. "It won't be the same without your problem-solving magic." "Thank you," I replied, meaning it. Many of these people were genuine colleagues who had no part in Richard's machinations. "I'll miss this team, too." Richard stood at the edge of the gathering, checking his watch frequently. The board meeting was at 2 p.m., and as department head, he'd need to prepare his quarterly presentation. I knew exactly what was in it. I'd helped design the reporting framework years ago. "Elaine, could I see you in my office when you're done here?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before walking away, his designer shoes clicking on the polished floor. 15 minutes later, I sat across from him, watching as he shuffled papers on his desk. The photo of his much younger girlfriend smiled vacantly from a silver frame, the only personal touch in his meticulously organized office. "I wanted to thank you for handling this transition so professionally," he said without looking up. "It's refreshing, considering your tenure with the company." The slight emphasis on tenure made it clear what he really meant: my age. It seemed the appropriate response. I replied evenly, thinking of Robert's advice about taking the high road even when others didn't deserve it. Richard finally met my eyes. "Your severance package is generous, 2 months' salary plus your unused vacation time. The paperwork will be ready for your signature tomorrow." "I appreciate that." I fingered the jade pendant at my neck, thinking of how this money would help fund the trip to Europe I'd promised Robert we'd take someday. He leaned back in his chair, curiosity finally getting the better of him. "I have to ask, you've been surprisingly calm about all this. Did you see it coming?" I allowed myself a small, enigmatic smile. "Let's just say I've learned to prepare for all contingencies in my time here." Richard's expression hardened slightly. "Well, company needs evolve. Fresh perspectives become necessary. I'm sure you understand completely." I agreed. Change is inevitable in any organization. Sometimes it comes from unexpected directions. His eyes narrowed at my cryptic response, but before he could press further, his phone buzzed with a reminder. "I need to prepare for the board meeting." "Of course," I said, standing to leave. My heart was beating faster now, the moment of truth approaching. "Good luck with your presentation." I've always found the board to be quite attentive to details. As I walked out, I could feel his eyes on my back, a new uncertainty in his gaze. My calm acceptance had planted a seed of doubt, exactly as I'd intended. Back at my desk, I fielded a text from Catherine, conference room A, 1:30. "Come through the executive in trance." "On my way soon," I replied, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously organizing my desk, backing up personal files, and creating detailed instructions for Olivia. To anyone watching, I was simply being thorough before my departure. The executive entrance, at 1:15, I picked up my leather portfolio and headed toward the restroom, a perfectly normal afternoon activity that wouldn't raise suspicions. Once out of sight from the main office area, I changed course, taking the elevator to the top floor, where senior executives had their offices. My heart pounded against my ribs as the elevator climbed. I thought of Robert and how he'd encouraged me to apply for this job at Peterson 10 years ago, despite my doubts about starting over at a new company in my 40s. "You'll be running the place someday, Ellie," he had said with complete confidence. If only he could see me now. The executive suite had its own private entrance to the boardroom, a door that I had never had cause to use in my 10 years with the company until today. Catherine was waiting for me in the hallway, her normally serious face softened with anticipation. She wore a navy suit that conveyed authority without trying too hard, something I'd always admired about her style. "Ready to make history?" she asked quietly, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, unconsciously touching my husband's ring for courage. Catherine noticed the gesture and smiled. "He would be proud, Elaine." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you for seeing what others missed." "Perfect," she replied, checking her watch. "The other board members are already seated. Richard will enter through the main door at exactly 2 p.m. Let's make sure we're in position before then." Together, we walked toward the executive entrance to Conference Room A, where everything was about to change. I felt a strange mix of emotions, vindication, anticipation, but also a touch of sadness for what might have been if Richard had been able to see beyond his biases. The boardroom of Peterson Consulting exuded power and tradition. 12 high-backed leather chairs surrounded an immense mahogany table that had witnessed decades of critical decisions. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of San Francisco's skyline, a constant reminder of the heights to which the company had climbed. By 1:45 p.m., 10 board members were already seated, engaged in pre-meeting small talk. Catherine nodded subtly toward an empty chair on her right, my designated seat. I felt a momentary flutter of nerves as I took my place, but it quickly subsided as several board members smiled in recognition. William Harrison, the 70-year-old chairman of the board, extended his hand. His eyes crinkled warmly, reminding me a little of my own father. "Ms. Bennett, we're delighted to finally have you join us officially. Catherine has spoken highly of your operational insights." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate the opportunity," I replied, my voice steady despite the significance of the moment. I thought of all the late nights at my kitchen table after Robert's death, when work had been my only solace, the only thing that made sense when everything else was falling apart. For the next 10 minutes, I was introduced to each board member. Most knew me by reputation or from previous project presentations, but this interaction was different. I was now their peer, not a subordinate reporting up the chain. I made a mental note of each face, each handshake, storing away impressions for future reference. At precisely 2 p.m., the main door opened. Richard entered, carrying his presentation materials and looking confident. He greeted several board members by name as he made his way around the table, placing copies of his report at each seat. Then his eyes landed on me. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable: confusion, followed by disbelief, then rapidly shifting to alarm. "Elaine, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. His perfectly styled hair seemed suddenly at odds with his flustered demeanor. Before I could respond, Catherine stood, commanding the room's attention. "Let's begin," she announced, gesturing for everyone to take their seats. "Before we move to department reports, I have an important announcement." Richard remained standing, his gaze darting between Catherine and me, clearly trying to piece together what was happening. The expensive leather portfolio in his hands now seemed to be a shield he was clutching rather than a professional accessory. "Please, take a seat, Richard," Catherine directed, waiting until he complied before continuing. As you all know, Peterson Consulting has been undergoing strategic restructuring to better position ourselves for the challenges ahead. After extensive evaluation, the executive committee and I have identified critical operational improvements needed across all departments. Richard fidgeted with his pen, no longer looking at me. A droplet of sweat had formed at his temple, threatening to make a journey down his face. To lead this effort, Catherine continued, we required someone with deep institutional knowledge, proven technical expertise, and the ability to bridge divisions within our organization. I'm pleased to announce that Elaine Bennett has accepted the position of Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. A round of applause filled the room. Several board members nodded approvingly in my direction. I sat straight, accepting their acknowledgement with a dignified smile, while inside my heart soared. Robert had been right all along. As COO, Elaine will oversee all operational aspects of the company, including project management, client relations, personnel, and quality assurance, Catherine explained, her voice clear and firm. All department heads will report directly to her, creating a more streamlined decision-making process. Richard's face had drained of color. I wasn't aware of this reorganization, he stammered. The decision was finalized 3 weeks ago, Catherine replied evenly, on a need-to-know basis. William Harrison leaned forward. Ms. Bennett's appointment was unanimously approved by the executive committee. Her first task will be conducting a comprehensive review of all departments, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities for growth. The revelation, I finally spoke, keeping my voice professional and measured. I'm looking forward to working with all department heads to optimize our operations. I paused, making deliberate eye contact with Richard. Everyone brings value to this organization, though sometimes it requires the right position to maximize that value. Richard's eyes met mine, understanding the subtle message. His department was under my purview now. His decision to replace me would be subject to my review. The irony couldn't have been more perfect, though I took no pleasure in his obvious discomfort. This wasn't about revenge, it was about finally having the opportunity to implement the changes I'd envisioned for years. Excellent, Catherine said masterfully, moving the meeting forward. Let's proceed with the quarterly reports. Richard, I believe you're first. Richard stood on unsteady legs, fumbling with his presentation materials. The confident department head who had dismissed me days earlier was gone, replaced by a man suddenly questioning every decision that had led to this moment. I felt a twinge of empathy, remembering how I'd felt when faced with unexpected challenges in the past. Before you begin, I interjected gently, I'd like to discuss the staffing changes you proposed earlier this week. Perhaps we should revisit some of those decisions. The silence that followed was profound. Richard cleared his throat, a bead of sweat visible on his temple. Perhaps we should discuss departmental staffing after the meeting, he suggested, his voice strained. Actually, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone, since it affects the quarterly projections you're about to present, we should address it now. I turned to the board. Richard has proposed replacing our senior project manager, the position I held until today, with a recent graduate who has no industry experience. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. Catherine watched intently, giving me space to establish my authority. The West Lake project is entering its most critical phase, I continued, thinking of all the relationships I'd built with that particular client. Changing key personnel now creates unnecessary risk to both timeline and budget. William Harrison frowned. Is this accurate, Richard? The West Lake contract represents 20% of our annual revenue. Richard's presentation folder trembled slightly in his hands. I believed fresh perspectives would benefit the team, he said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears, but obviously, with a new organizational structure, we can reassess. Indeed, I agreed, softening my tone. I wasn't here to humiliate him, only to correct a mistake. In fact, I've already spoken with Diana Ford about stepping into the role. Her 15 years of experience and familiarity with the Westlake specifications make her the logical choice. I didn't mention that Diana was a 47-year-old working mother who Richard had repeatedly passed over for promotion despite her exceptional performance reviews. That conversation would come later, in private. Catherine nodded approvingly. Diana is an excellent project manager. I support this decision. The look of defeat on Richard's face was unmistakable, but he managed to proceed with his quarterly report. His usually confident delivery was replaced by hesitation and frequent references to notes. When he finished, the questions from board members were pointed and occasionally critical, a stark contrast to the easy reception he typically enjoyed. As the meeting progressed through other departmental updates, I made careful notes and asked thoughtful questions that demonstrated my comprehensive understanding of the company's operations. By the time we reached new business items, the dynamic in the room had shifted palpably. Board members increasingly directed their questions to me rather than Catherine or the department heads. Near the meeting's conclusion, Catherine introduced another agenda item. As part of our restructuring, we'll be reviewing each department's age demographics and succession planning strategies. Recent data suggests our most innovative solutions have come from cross-generational collaboration. She displayed a slide showing productivity metrics across different age groups. As you can see, teams with age diversity consistently outperform homogeneous groups. I leaned forward, feeling passionate about this particular topic. If I may, I said, I'd like to share a personal perspective on this. Catherine nodded encouragingly. My late husband used to say that wisdom and innovation aren't mutually exclusive, I began, my voice steady despite the personal reference. I've seen firsthand how teams with diverse ages and backgrounds approach problems differently. The most effective solutions I've witnessed came from combining the technological savvy of our younger staff with the contextual understanding and client relationship skills of our more experienced members. Several board members nodded in agreement. What makes a company truly resilient, I continued, is its ability to value both fresh perspectives and institutional knowledge. Neither is complete without the other. My own experience as a mother raising 2 children while building a career taught me that balance is everything, in families and in business. I caught Richard's eye across the table. Experience and fresh perspectives both have value when properly integrated, I said. I look forward to working with all department heads to optimize their team compositions. The meeting adjourned at 4:30 p.m. As board members gathered their materials and engaged in post-meeting conversations, Richard approached me cautiously. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said stiffly. "Had I known, you'd have made different decisions," I finished for him, not unkindly. "I understand completely." He nodded uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. "About Olivia," he began. "She's talented but inexperienced," I said. "I think she'd benefit from our junior manager development program rather than being thrown into a senior role prematurely. Don't you agree?" Richard knew he had no choice. "Of course. I'll inform her of the change." "No need," I replied. "As COO, I should welcome all new employees personally. I'll meet with her tomorrow to discuss her actual role and set appropriate expectations. She's a single mother, you know. Our flexible scheduling options could make a real difference for her." Richard looked surprised at this information he'd clearly never bothered to learn about his new hire. I wasn't aware, getting to know our team members as people, not just resources, will be a priority under my leadership, I said, the message clear but not combative. The evening, Catherine joined us, effectively ending the conversation. Elaine, the executive team is gathering for dinner at Bayside Restaurant at 7 o'clock. We'd love for you to join us. I'd be delighted, I said, collecting my notes as Richard walked away. I watched him go, feeling strangely conflicted. There was satisfaction in this moment of professional vindication, certainly, but no real joy in seeing another person's discomfort, even someone who had treated me unfairly. Catherine watched him with a calculating expression. He'll either adapt or find himself increasingly marginalized, she observed quietly. Everyone eventually faces the consequences of their decisions. Some sooner than others, I replied. But I hope he adapts. Richard is talented in his own way. His problem is tunnel vision and bias, not lack of ability. Catherine smiled, seeming pleased with my response. That's why you're perfect for this role, Elaine. You see the whole picture, not just the convenient parts. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay as I left the boardroom through the executive entrance, not as a visitor this time, but as someone who belonged there. The golden light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. I paused at the panoramic view, remembering how Robert and I used to watch sunsets from our favorite spot near the Golden Gate Bridge. We did it, Rob, I whispered, touching my wedding ring. Before heading to the executive dinner, I made a detour back to my old desk. I needed to retrieve my jade plant and a few personal items. The office was mostly empty now, with just a few dedicated souls still working. Marcus looked up as I approached, raising an eyebrow at my changed demeanor. Something's different, he said, studying my face. Did you win the lottery or something? I laughed softly. Something like that. You'll hear about it tomorrow at the company meeting. His eyes widened with understanding. You're not leaving at all, are you? Not exactly, I admitted. But I'll be moving to a different office. Marcus grinned broadly. I knew it. Nobody with your talent just gets shown the door without a fight. He lowered his voice. Is Richard in trouble? Richard is at a crossroads, I replied diplomatically. His future depends on his choices moving forward. I gathered my jade plant, the framed photo of my family, and a few other personal items into a small box. Before leaving, I placed a handwritten note on Olivia's desk. See me in the executive suite tomorrow at 9 a.m. There's been a change of plans. Elaine Bennett, COO. Later that evening, as I sat among the executive team at Bayside Restaurant, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and humility. The view of the bay was spectacular, the food exquisite, but what struck me most was how quickly the dynamic had adjusted. These people, most of whom had barely acknowledged me a week ago, now sought my opinions and included me in their conversations as if I'd always been one of them. William Harrison raised his glass in a toast. To Elaine Bennett and the new era at Peterson Consulting. As glasses clinked around the table, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, not just the 10 years at Peterson, but the decades of work before that, the challenges of balancing career and family, the loss of Robert, and the resilience I'd had to find within myself. None of it had been easy, but perhaps that was the point. Nothing worthwhile ever is. What's your first priority as COO? One of the executives asked. I considered the question carefully. Building bridges, I said finally. Between departments, between generations of employees, between tradition and innovation. Peterson has all the pieces for exceptional success. We just need to connect them more effectively. Catherine nodded approvingly. And that's exactly why you're sitting in that chair tonight. Friday morning's company-wide meeting brought a palpable buzz to the auditorium. Employees from every department gathered, whispering speculations about the organizational changes mentioned in Catherine's email. I stood backstage with Catherine and the executive team, dressed in a navy suit that signaled my new authority while still feeling true to myself. Nervous? Catherine asked, straightening her blazer. Surprisingly, no, I replied, fingering my husband's ring. It feels right. At exactly 9 a.m., Catherine took the stage to enthusiastic applause. I watched from the wings as she outlined Peterson Consulting's vision for the future, emphasizing innovation, collaboration, and strategic growth. To lead us through this next chapter, Catherine announced, "I'm pleased to introduce our new Chief Operations Officer, Elaine Bennett." As I walked onto the stage, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Colleagues who had worked alongside me for years stood in applause. Project managers who had seen my solutions save impossible deadlines cheered. Even the administrative staff with whom I'd always maintained respectful relationships showed their approval. Richard sat in the third row, clapping mechanically, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," I began, waiting for the applause to subside. My voice was steady, but inside I felt a surge of emotion. This moment wasn't just for me, it was for Robert, for my children, for everyone who had believed in me over the years. For 10 years, I've had the privilege of solving problems at Peterson Consulting. Today, I'm honored to help shape our collective future. I outlined my vision for operational excellence, emphasizing collaboration across generations and departments. Experience and fresh perspectives both have tremendous value, I said, making brief eye contact with Richard. Our strength lies in harnessing both. Then I shifted to a more personal tone. When my husband was diagnosed with cancer 6 years ago, I learned something important about both life and business. The only constant is change, and how we respond to that change defines us. Peterson has given me the opportunity to grow through many changes, and I'm committed to ensuring everyone in this company has the same opportunity, regardless of age, background, or circumstance. I saw several people nodding in understanding, perhaps thinking of their own life challenges. My door will always be open, I continued. Because the best solutions come from listening to different voices and perspectives. After the presentation, employees approached to offer congratulations. Marcus gave me a bear hug, whispering, "I knew you were too valuable to lose." Diana Ford's eyes shone with happy tears as she thanked me for the senior role. Olivia, looking slightly confused, waited until most had dispersed. "Ms. Bennett, Elaine," she began tentatively, shifting her weight from one foot to another. "I'm a little unclear about my position now." New beginnings, I smiled reassuringly at Olivia, noticing the worry lines around her eyes. "Let's meet in my office in an hour. I think you have great potential, just not in the role Richard originally proposed." I lowered my voice slightly. "And I'd like to discuss some of our flexible scheduling options that might help with your son's daycare situation." Her eyes widened. "You remembered about that?" "Of course," I said, thinking of my own years juggling young children and career advancement. Some things never leave you, even decades later. Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I'll be there." As the crowd thinned, I spotted Richard standing alone near the exit. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, he gave me a small nod of acknowledgement before disappearing through the doors. It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. The transition into my role as COO happened more smoothly than anyone might have expected. By Monday morning, I had moved into the executive suite on the top floor, a spacious corner office with windows overlooking the Bay Bridge. The contrast to my former cubicle was striking, but I made sure to bring along the small jade plant that had survived 10 years of engineering crises with me. It sat on my new desk, a reminder of Robert and the day he'd told me to grow where you're planted. I'd spent the weekend reorganizing my apartment, clearing out Robert's old office to create a proper workspace for when I needed to bring work home. As I sorted through his old papers, I found a card he'd given me on my first day at Peterson. "Reach for the stars, my love," he'd written. "They may be further away than they appear, but I know you'll get there." The tears came then, not of sadness but of a peculiar bittersweet joy. He'd seen this potential in me long before I'd dared to see it in myself. My first official week was packed with meetings, getting to know each department head personally, reviewing ongoing projects, and assessing operational bottlenecks. I made a point of being visible throughout the building, visiting departments and speaking directly with employees at all levels. This wasn't just good leadership, it was a message that the barriers between executives and staff were being dismantled. I implemented my first policy change on Wednesday, a flexible scheduling option for employees with caregiving responsibilities. Whether you're caring for young children or aging parents, I explained in the company-wide email, we recognize that work-life integration is essential for both productivity and well-being. Olivia was among the first to sign up, her grateful smile worth every bit of the bureaucratic resistance I'd encountered. Richard had been notably subdued. Our first one-on-one meeting had been brief and focused strictly on his department's metrics. He avoided direct eye contact and kept his responses clipped and professional. I neither gloated nor referenced our previous dynamics, treating him with the same respectful professionalism I showed all department heads. "I'd like to see more age diversity in your team's hiring plans for next quarter," I said as our meeting concluded. "I'll revise the recruitment strategy," he replied stiffly. "Richard," I said, causing him to pause at the door. "Your expertise is valuable to Peterson. I hope you know that." Surprise flickered across his face before he nodded and left. On Friday afternoon, Catherine stopped by my office with 2 cups of coffee. "So, 1 week in, how does it feel?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching on my wedding ring, which I now wore openly on a chain around my neck. Challenging in all the right ways, I replied honestly, accepting the coffee. "There's so much opportunity for improvement." She nodded, looking pleased. "The board is impressed with your approach so far. William Harrison specifically mentioned your talent for asking the right questions." I smiled, thinking of all the questions I'd stored up over the years, waiting for the right moment to voice them. "I've had years to think about what I'd do differently if given the chance," I admitted. Catherine smiled knowingly. "That's exactly why you were the right choice. Oh, and I thought you'd want to know, Richard has requested a transfer to our Seattle office." "Running away?" I asked, raising an eyebrow, though I felt a twinge of regret. I'd hoped he might adapt. "He claims it's for family reasons," Catherine replied, "but we both know better." I considered this news thoughtfully, remembering the young Richard I'd met 10 years ago, ambitious, sharp, but already showing signs of the biases that would eventually cloud his judgment. "Let's approve it," I said finally. "Sometimes a fresh start benefits everyone. And he does have talents that could flourish in a different environment, especially with proper mentorship." Catherine raised her coffee cup in a small toast. "Spoken like a true executive." I returned the gesture, the warmth of the cup matching the warmth that spread through me. "Spoken like someone who knows the value of second chances." Later that evening, as I watered my jade plant in the golden light of sunset, my phone chimed with a text from my daughter. "Mom, just booked tickets for next weekend. Dad's anniversary. We should be together." I smiled, typing back, "Can't wait to see you both. So much to celebrate and remember." I looked out at the San Francisco skyline, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. 10 years ago, I'd arrived at Peterson as a mid-career professional with something to prove. Today, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter, carrying with me all the lessons, all the losses, all the triumphs that had shaped me. "We did it, Rob," I whispered to the fading light. "We really did it." The jade plant seemed to stand a little taller in response, its leaves catching the last rays of sun, growing, thriving, persevering. Just like me. "Take a nice walk," my husband Brian called out mockingly from the driver's seat, his family laughing along with him. I stood there in disbelief, one hand protectively cradling my 8-month pregnant belly, as their luxury SUV pulled away from the remote highway rest stop. The blazing summer sun beat down mercilessly as I watched their taillights disappear around the bend, headed toward their beach resort vacation without me. My name is Olivia Walker, and until that moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. But watching my husband of 3 years abandon his pregnant wife at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, with his mother Margaret and sister Christina laughing in the back seat, that was a whole new level of cruelty I never imagined possible. I could still see their smirking faces through the rear window as they drove off, Christina's phone aimed at me, undoubtedly capturing my moment of helpless confusion for their amusement. It had started as a normal bathroom break during our road trip to the beach resort. I'd asked Brian to wait while I used the restroom, as walking was becoming increasingly difficult in my 3rd trimester. The summer heat was particularly brutal that day, and the air conditioning in the car had been set deliberately low by Margaret, who complained about pregnant women and their ridiculous body temperatures just loudly enough for me to hear from my cramped position in the back seat. When I came out of the restroom, moving as quickly as my pregnant body would allow, I saw them all laughing and pointing at me through the car windows. Brian revved the engine as I approached, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Before I could reach the vehicle, they drove forward several feet, then stopped, toying with me like a cat with a mouse. When I finally got close again, breathless and confused, Brian rolled down his window. "Take a nice walk, Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The exercise will do you good." Then they sped away, leaving me stranded in the scorching heat, my purse, phone, and everything else still in the car. I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened, my hands trembling as they moved instinctively to protect my unborn baby. The gas station owner, Howard Miller, an older gentleman with kind eyes and weathered hands, witnessed the whole thing. He immediately brought me inside the air-conditioned store and offered me a cold bottle of water. "I've got security cameras covering the whole property," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "What they did to you, ma'am, that's not right. Not right at all." I sat in his small office, trying to process what had just happened. My phone was in the car, along with my purse and everything else. I was literally stranded with nothing but the sundress I was wearing and the wedding ring that now felt like a mockery on my finger. Howard's wife, Cynthia, who helped run the store, brought me some water and crackers, her motherly face creased with concern. "I'm calling the local news," Cynthia declared, her face flushed with righteous anger. "People need to see this. What kind of man leaves his pregnant wife stranded, and his family laughing about it? This isn't right." I should have felt embarrassed or tried to stop her. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Let them call the news. Let everyone see exactly what kind of man Brian Walker really was. As I rubbed my swollen belly, feeling my baby girl kick as if to reassure me, I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my daughter from a family that thought cruelty was amusing entertainment. Looking back, there had been warning signs about Brian and his family from the beginning. When we first met at a charity event 3 years ago, Brian seemed different from his family, kinder, more genuine. He was a sales manager at American Family Life Insurance, a company that prided itself on traditional family values. I was a kindergarten teacher who had spent 15 years working with children at the same small school, where the kids called me Miss Olivia and made my days bright with their innocent smiles and boundless curiosity. We fell in love quickly, or at least I thought we did. Despite his family's subtle disapproval of my ordinary background and career, we got married within a year. I was 39 then, and the thought of starting a family of my own filled me with quiet joy, a dream I'd almost given up on before meeting Brian. Margaret, my mother-in-law, ran the prestigious Walker Family Foundation, which organized high-profile charity events in their small Midwestern town. She never missed an opportunity to remind me that I didn't quite fit into their social circle, her voice always maintaining a veneer of politeness that barely concealed her disdain. "It's sweet that you work with children," she would say during family dinners, her voice dripping with condescension, though I always hoped Brian would marry someone more accomplished. Her perfectly manicured hand would gesture vaguely, as if my 15 years of dedication to education were merely a quaint hobby. Christina, Brian's sister, was even worse. A successful attorney with a failed marriage behind her, she seemed to channel all her bitterness into making my life difficult. She'd orchestrated countless social situations designed to humiliate me, like the time she invited me to a casual lunch that turned out to be a formal charity board meeting, leaving me mortified in my simple sundress among women in designer suits. "Oh, I must have forgotten to mention the dress code," she'd said with a smirk that matched her brother's all too well. But Brian had always defended me, at least in the beginning. His warm hand would find mine under the table, a silent apology for his family's behavior. That changed when I got pregnant at 42. It was as if a switch flipped in him. Suddenly, he started agreeing with his mother's criticism, laughing at his sister's cruel jokes, and treating me like I was an embarrassment, a burden he was forced to carry. My advanced maternal age, as they called it, became their favorite topic of dinner conversation, with thinly veiled comments about the risks and complications I would surely face. Each word was a small cut, a paper cut to my soul, especially as I had already been worried about the pregnancy myself. Howard's voice brought me back to the present. "The news crew will be here in about an hour," he said, checking his phone, "and I've got the security footage ready. Shows everything clear as day." Cynthia handed me another bottle of water, her eyes soft with concern. "Your hands are shaking, dear. When was the last time you ate something?" I realized I'd missed lunch, caught up in the excitement of the trip that was supposed to be our last vacation before the baby came. Brian had insisted his family join us, claiming it would be good for family bonding. I should have known something was wrong when he made me sit in the back seat so his mother could sit up front. They were whispering and laughing the whole time, I said quietly, my voice cracking as the reality of my situation began to sink in. I thought they were just excited about the vacation, but they were planning this, weren't they? Cynthia's face hardened, the lines around her mouth deepening. "Well, they won't be laughing when everyone sees what they did. My nephew works at Channel 6 News. Trust me, this story won't stay quiet." While waiting for the news crew, I borrowed Howard's landline to call my best friend, Rachel. She'd never trusted Brian or his family, especially after what happened at my baby shower last month when Christina had accidentally knocked over the cake, ruining the event and my new maternity dress in one swoop. "Olivia, thank God you're okay," Rachel answered, her voice tight with worry. "I've been trying to reach you for the past hour. You need to see what they're posting on social media right now." Howard turned his computer monitor toward me, logging into Facebook. There on Brian's page was a series of photos posted just 20 minutes ago. My hands trembled as I read the caption, "Finally free for a relaxing family vacation." Some people just can't handle the Walker lifestyle. #BeachLife #FamilyFirst. The photos showed Brian, Margaret, and Christina lounging by the resort pool, cocktails in hand, acting like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't just abandoned a heavily pregnant woman at a rest stop without her phone, money, or identification. Comments from their social circle poured in, all laughing and congratulating them on their escape. "There's more," Rachel said grimly. "Margaret's Foundation just announced a fundraiser for family values and responsibility next week. The hypocrisy is unreal. I'm coming to get you." "Where exactly are you?" As Rachel took down the directions, Howard's security footage was playing on his other monitor. I watched myself walking out of the bathroom, pregnant belly prominent, moving as quickly as I could, as Brian's SUV deliberately pulled away. The sound was clear enough to pick up their laughter and Christina's excited voice saying, "Get it on video. Her face is priceless." "Those aren't people," Cynthia muttered, watching the footage with me, her arm protectively around my shoulders. "They're monsters wearing human skin." My phone was still in the car, along with my hospital bag, the bag I'd packed carefully with everything I might need, given how close I was to my due date. The realization hit me hard. They hadn't just abandoned me, they deliberately put my baby at risk. A sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Cynthia noticed immediately and grabbed my hand. "Honey, are you having contractions?" Her voice was laced with concern. "Just Braxton Hicks," I assured her, trying to sound calmer than I felt. But another pain made me gasp and double over slightly. "At least, I think they are." Howard was already on the phone with emergency services. "Better safe than sorry," he said firmly. "The nearest hospital is 40 minutes away. I'm not taking any chances with you and that baby." As if on cue, a local news van pulled into the parking lot. The reporter, a woman named Allison Green, took one look at my condition and made an executive decision. "We're getting you to the hospital first," she said firmly, her professional demeanor momentarily softening. "We can do the interview there. This story isn't just about abandonment anymore, it's about endangering an unborn child." As they helped me into the news van, I saw more media vehicles approaching. Apparently, the story had already caught attention on social media. My hands clutched my belly protectively as another contraction hit, this one stronger than before. "The doctors will take good care of you," Allison assured me, holding my hand as they drove, her eyes kind beneath her professional exterior. "And we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people the Walkers really are." Looking out the window at the gathering media circus, I realized this had become much bigger than just me. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to unexpected justice. And as my baby kicked strongly against my palm, I felt a fierce new determination growing inside me alongside her. No matter what happened next, we would face it together, mother and daughter, stronger than the cruelty that had tried to break us. At the hospital's maternity ward became an unexpected headquarters for what was quickly turning into a viral news story. My contractions had subsided, false labor brought on by stress, the doctors said, but they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. The on-call obstetrician had furrowed her brow when I explained I'd been left at a rest stop, her clinical detachment briefly giving way to undisguised disapproval. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like to see," she told me, squeezing my hand gently. "We need to monitor both you and the baby. Stress at this stage of pregnancy can be dangerous." By evening, the security footage from the rest stop had hit every major news outlet in the state. My room was filled with flowers sent by strangers who'd seen the story, their cards bearing messages of support that brought tears to my eyes. Rachel arrived within an hour, rushing to my bedside with an overnight bag of essentials and fierce protectiveness radiating from her. "Mrs. Walker," a nurse said, poking her head into my room, her expression sympathetic. "There are more reporters asking to speak with you. Should I send them away? You really should be resting." I was about to answer when my phone lit up. Rachel had brought it to me after retrieving it from the resort where Brian and his family were staying. A staff member had found it in their room and, after seeing the news, reached out to help. "Olivia, turn on Channel 6 now," Rachel urged, her voice urgent as she grabbed the remote control. "They're interviewing Margaret at the resort." The nurse helped me find the right channel. There was my mother-in-law, perfectly coiffed in her designer resort wear, a practiced smile fixed on her face as she tried to spin the story. "This is all a misunderstanding," Margaret said smoothly to the reporter, her hands clasped demurely in her lap. "Olivia has been very emotional lately. Pregnancy hormones, you understand. She asked for some time alone, and we respected her wishes. We would never abandon her." The reporter wasn't buying it. "We have security footage showing your son and your family laughing as you drove away." Mrs. Walker had no phone, no purse, and was 8 months pregnant in 95-degree heat. "How do you explain that?" Margaret's composed facade cracked slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing her aristocratic features. "The footage must be misleading. Our family foundation has always stood for traditional values and the importance of motherhood." Her voice took on a sanctimonious tone that made my stomach turn. The feed cut to the security video showing their SUV pulling away as they laughed. The audio was crystal clear. "Take a nice walk," Brian's mocking voice rang out, followed by Christina's gleeful, "Her face is priceless. She actually thinks we're joking." My phone started buzzing with notifications. The Walker Family Foundation's social media pages were being flooded with outraged comments. Their major donors were publicly withdrawing support, with one prominent businessman tweeting, "Cannot support an organization whose leadership abandons a pregnant woman. Shameful behavior from the Walker family." Brian's company, American Family Life Insurance, was trending on Twitter. The irony wasn't lost on me, a company that built its brand on family values now associated with a man who'd abandoned his pregnant wife. "Your story's gone national," Allison Green said, walking into my room with her camera crew, respectfully staying at the doorway until I nodded permission. "People are furious. Do you want to make a statement?" "Only if you feel up to it, of course." I thought about Brian and his family, probably still lounging by the pool, thinking they were untouchable with their money and social connections. I thought about other women who might be trapped in situations with people like them, people who wore masks of respectability while inflicting cruelty behind closed doors. "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter in the hospital bed, one hand resting protectively on my belly. "I want to talk about what happened." The interview was raw and honest. I described how Brian's behavior had changed during my pregnancy, how his family had orchestrated this vacation to humiliate me. I talked about the baby bag, filled with my medical information, that they'd driven away with, showing how little they cared about my child's safety. I didn't cry, somehow. Telling the truth gave me strength I didn't know I had. "I'm not a perfect person," I told Allison, looking directly into the camera. "But no one deserves to be treated this way. And I won't let my daughter grow up thinking this kind of behavior is acceptable, no matter who it comes from." As I spoke, more messages flooded in. Brian's colleagues were publicly distancing themselves. His company's CEO had released a statement saying they were deeply concerned about the incident and would be reviewing the situation. The resort where they were staying reported that other guests had complained about sharing space with those horrible people from the news. "Mrs. Walker," Allison said gently when we finished, "your story has struck a nerve. Women across the country are sharing similar experiences of emotional abuse and abandonment. You've started something important." I placed both hands on my belly, feeling my daughter kick strongly against my palms, a tiny fighter, just like her mother was learning to be. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said, my voice steady despite my exhaustion. I'm doing this because no one should have to experience what I did today, and my daughter needs to know that her mother stood up to bullies, even when those bullies were family. The following morning, by morning, the story had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. Howard, the gas station owner, appeared on a national morning show, sharing how his security cameras had captured not just the abandonment but a disturbing conversation before I'd come out of the bathroom. They were planning it, Howard revealed to millions of viewers, his normally gentle face stern with indignation. The audio picked up the mother-in-law saying, "This will teach her to embarrass our family." They were laughing about leaving a pregnant woman stranded. Who does that? The interview cut to a clip of Brian, Margaret, and Christina walking into the resort, champagne glasses in hand, joking and laughing. The juxtaposition with the security footage of me stranded at the rest stop was damning. Rachel rushed into my hospital room, her face flushed with news. "Olivia, you need to see this. Someone leaked emails from Margaret's foundation." She held up her tablet, showing me internal communications from the Walker Family Foundation. The emails revealed a calculated campaign to isolate me from Brian, with Margaret explicitly stating that a pregnant kindergarten teacher wasn't Walker material. But the real bombshell came from Christina's leaked texts to Brian. "Once the baby's born, we'll have grounds to claim she's an unfit mother. Your position at American Family Insurance and Mom's Foundation connections will make sure we get custody." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about humiliating me, they'd been planning to take my baby. My hands trembled as I set down the tablet, a cold dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "They wanted to take her," I whispered, one hand moving protectively to my belly. My own husband was plotting to take my child. Rachel sat beside me on the bed, her arm around my shoulders. "They won't get away with it. Not now. The whole world knows what they tried to do." "Mrs. Walker?" A man in a crisp suit appeared at my door, introducing himself as Daniel Roberts, American Family Life Insurance's Chief Ethics Officer. "May I speak with you privately?" After Rachel stepped out, he got straight to the point. "We've suspended your husband's employment, pending an internal investigation. Our company cannot be associated with someone who would endanger a pregnant woman and deliberately plan to separate a mother from her child." He handed me a folder. "These are screenshots from Brian's company email showing he used corporate resources to research custody lawyers specializing in maternal fitness cases. We're turning everything over to your legal team, should you choose to pursue this matter." My hand shook as I read through the documents. Brian had been laying groundwork for months, documenting every small mistake I made, planning to use my emotional instability against me. I remembered how he'd smile sympathetically when I'd cry over pregnancy hormones, now realizing he'd been cataloging these moments as evidence. "One more thing," Daniel added, his expression grave. "Our HR department discovered Brian has a pattern of workplace harassment. Several female employees have now come forward with complaints they were previously afraid to file. This goes beyond your situation, Mrs. Walker. You've exposed a systemic problem." As he left, Allison returned with breaking news. Margaret's largest charity partners were publicly cutting ties with the Walker Family Foundation. The prestigious country club where they held their social events had revoked their membership. Their carefully constructed world of influence was crumbling around them. "The resort just asked them to leave," Allison reported, barely concealing her satisfaction. "Their guests were complaining about sharing space with those horrible people from the news. They're being escorted out as we speak." My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was from Brian's assistant at American Family Life Insurance. I saved the dashcam footage from his company car. He and his mother were planning this for weeks. I couldn't stay silent anymore. You're not alone. I looked out my hospital window at the gathering media crews, thinking about how quickly truth can come to light. The walkers had planned to destroy me, but their own actions had destroyed themselves instead. For the first time since being abandoned at that rest stop, I felt myself take a full, deep breath. Whatever came next, my daughter and I would face it together. Unexpected visitor. The next day brought an unexpected visitor, Brian's former executive assistant, Natalie Baker, clutching a thick folder and looking nervous. She hesitated at the door to my hospital room, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Mrs. Walker," she said softly, "I'm Natalie, Brian's former assistant. I can't keep quiet anymore." Rachel, who had been arranging flowers sent by my kindergarten students' parents, moved protectively closer to my bed. "What do you want?" Natalie's eyes flickered between us. "To help. The custody plan, it wasn't just about getting the baby. There's money involved. A lot of it." She sank into the chair beside my hospital bed, the weight of her knowledge visibly pressing down on her shoulders. Natalie spread out documents across my bed, insurance policies, trust fund papers, and financial statements painted a disturbing picture that made my blood run cold. "They took out several policies related to your pregnancy," she explained, her voice shaking slightly as she pointed to the paperwork. "Including a substantial life insurance policy you never knew about. Brian listed himself and his mother as beneficiaries. They were hoping something would happen to me," I whispered, the full implication hitting me with sickening clarity. Natalie nodded grimly. "They were planning to paint you as unstable," she continued, unable to meet my eyes. "The abandonment wasn't just cruelty, it was meant to provoke a stress reaction they could document. If you'd gone into labor at that gas station." She didn't need to finish the sentence. "If something had happened to me or the baby due to premature labor in those conditions, they would have benefited financially while painting themselves as the grieving family." I processed the paperwork, Natalie continued, guilt etched across her face. I knew something wasn't right, but I was afraid to speak up. "Brian has a way of making people feel powerless." Rachel, who had been quietly listening, spoke up, her voice trembling with barely controlled anger. "We need to get this to the FBI. This isn't just a viral news story anymore, it's attempted insurance fraud and endangerment." Allison arrived just as we were reviewing the documents, her journalist's instincts immediately sensing the gravity of what we'd discovered. "We need to be careful how we handle this," she advised, examining the paperwork with a practiced eye. "The Walkers still have powerful friends. They're already trying to spin this as a publicity stunt." As if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification. Margaret had posted a video statement on the Foundation's website, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, her voice breaking in a performance worthy of an Oscar. "We only wanted to protect our grandchild," she claimed, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Olivia's erratic behavior had us deeply concerned. We never meant." The video cut off as another call came in, Brian himself. After conferring with Rachel and Natalie, I put it on speaker, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Olivia, baby, please," he begged, his voice honey-sweet in a way that once would have melted my heart but now turned my stomach. "This has all gotten out of hand. Let's talk privately, work things out. Think about our daughter. She needs her father." I thought about the insurance policies, the custody plans, the calculated cruelty. My hand rested on my belly, feeling my daughter's reassuring movements. "You're right, Brian," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "She does need her father. Just not one who would risk her life for a financial scheme." "What are you talking about?" His voice turned sharp, the facade cracking. "Be careful what you say, Olivia. Remember who you're dealing with. A strange calm settled over me. No, Brian, remember who you dealt with. A kindergarten teacher who knows how to document everything, who has witnesses, security footage, and now your own paper trail. Who has the national media watching every move you make. The line went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, the fake sweetness was gone, replaced by cold fury. You'll regret this. My family, your family, is finished, I cut in. Check your phone, Brian. The FBI just announced an investigation into the foundation's finances. Apparently, someone sent them some very interesting documents. Natalie smiled grimly as she hung up her own phone. The federal agents just arrived at the hotel where they're staying, she reported. The insurance company's fraud division is cooperating fully. I rubbed my belly, feeling my daughter kick strongly. She's going to grow up knowing her mother stood up to bullies, I said softly, a new certainty filling me. That's worth more than any trust fund or family name. Allison's camera crew captured the moment the FBI led Margaret out of the hotel in handcuffs, her perfectly crafted image crumbling as she faced the consequences of her actions. Christina followed shortly after, her legal expertise useless in the face of such overwhelming evidence. Brian was the last to emerge, his head bowed, no longer the confident sales manager but a desperate man facing federal charges. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. As I watched them on the hospital room's television, I felt no joy in their downfall, only relief that my daughter would be safe from their schemes and manipulation. 1 week later, I sat in my hospital room cradling my newborn daughter, Emma, who had decided to make her entrance 2 weeks early, perfectly healthy and beautiful despite the stress that had preceded her birth. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength, as if to tell me she'd been fighting alongside me all along. The TV mounted on the wall played coverage of the Walker family's downfall, which continued to unfold like a particularly satisfying novel. Breaking news: federal investigators have uncovered a pattern of insurance fraud at the Walker Family Foundation, the anchor announced, her expression appropriately solemn. Sources say the attempted exploitation of a pregnant woman was just the tip of the iceberg. The footage cut to Brian being led out of his lawyer's office in handcuffs, no longer the polished executive but a man facing serious federal charges. Margaret's foundation was being dissolved, its assets frozen pending investigation. Christina's social connections had evaporated overnight, and her law firm had placed her on indefinite leave. Howard and Cynthia from the gas station had sent a beautiful arrangement of yellow roses along with a teddy bear for Emma and a note that brought tears to my eyes. Your daughter has a strong mother. That's worth more than any fancy family name. Rachel helped me adjust Emma's blanket as we watched Brian's company CEO make a statement on the news. American Family Life Insurance is establishing a fund for victims of domestic manipulation and financial abuse. The seed money comes from the bonus we withdrew from Brian Walker upon his termination. How are you feeling? Rachel asked softly, her eyes filled with concern as she gently smoothed my hair. Surprisingly okay, I answered honestly, looking down at Emma's peaceful face. She had my eyes and nose, but nothing of Brian in her features, a small mercy I hadn't dared hope for. I feel like I can breathe again for the first time in years. I realized then how much of myself I had gradually surrendered during my marriage, how I had dimmed my own light to avoid casting shadows on Brian's fragile ego. The woman who had stood up to the Walkers, who had faced the cameras and told her truth, that was the real me, the me I had nearly forgotten. I went by your apartment today, Rachel said, pulling up pictures on her phone. The parents from your kindergarten class organized a nursery setup party. Wait till you see what they did. She showed me photos of my spare bedroom transformed into a beautiful nursery, painted in soft yellows and greens, filled with everything Emma and I would need. My colleagues had pitched in for a crib, and the children had made colorful paper chains and drawings to decorate the walls. "People care about you, Olivia," Rachel said, squeezing my hand. "Real people, not social climbers like the Walkers." The hospital phone rang, and Rachel answered it, her expression changing to surprise. "It's the governor's office," she whispered, handing me the receiver. The governor herself was calling to express her support and to inform me that she was proposing legislation, inspired by my experience, that would make it a felony to deliberately abandon a pregnant woman in dangerous conditions. They were calling it the Walker Protection Act, an ironic name that would forever attach the Walker family name to their shame rather than their former prestige. "We would be honored if you would attend the signing ceremony," the governor said, her voice warm with sincerity. "Your courage has inspired many women to come forward with their own stories of abuse." After I hung up, I looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in my arms, unaware of the storms that had raged before her birth or the changes she had inspired. "Your mom made a difference," I whispered to her, touching her perfect cheek. "And she's just getting started." Margaret's crocodile tears at her sentencing hadn't swayed the judge, who cited her calculated cruelty in handing down a 5-year sentence for insurance fraud and conspiracy. Brian and Christina faced similar consequences for their roles in the scheme, their carefully constructed veneer of respectability permanently shattered. My story had become a catalyst for change. American Family Life Insurance had hired me as a consultant for their new family protection initiatives, allowing me to work from home while caring for Emma. The speaking invitations poured in with women's groups, corporate ethics panels, law enforcement training sessions. But my favorite moments were still in my classroom, teaching my young students about kindness and standing up to bullies. Emma thrived, surrounded by love from my real family, Rachel, who became her godmother, Howard and Cynthia, who visited regularly, my parents, who had rushed to be with me after hearing the news, and the countless strangers who had become allies. The Walker family's social media accounts stayed silent, their once mighty influence reduced to a cautionary tale. "Remember," I told a reporter who asked about my message to others, "sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to our greatest strength." Emma will grow up knowing that her mother didn't just survive, she helped change things for the better. As I spoke those words, I believed them with every fiber of my being. The abandoned woman at the rest stop seemed like a distant memory now, a chrysalis from which a stronger, wiser woman had emerged. Emma and I would build a life filled with genuine love and connection, far richer than anything the Walkers could have offered with their hollow values and cold hearts.